Tip FM's Tip Today.
With Slattery's Garage, Puck On. Over half a century driving the people of Tipperary and surrounding areas with quality, reliable and economical vehicles, new and used. Call the sales team today to discuss your next car or van on 067 24111.
Thanks, Pat, and welcome back to the final hour of Tip Today. I was speaking to Angie McGrath in the first hour of the programme. We were speaking about grief and, difficulties around Christmas if you've lost somebody around that time. Kay was on and she said that lady is right about girls doing all the stuff for sick parents. I must say the boys are great for the driving for the hospital appointments. Also, she's right about life not being the same when both parents have passed on. Christmas is a very difficult time. Even the ads and the Christmas songs can make you cry, says Kate to us this morning. Thanks for that, Kate. In reference to what Thomas Conway was saying to us, then Brian was on, and this is Brian's opinion now, by the way. And Brian says the Cartel de las Soles does not exist in Venezuela. It refers to arm patches worn by some of the previous Venezuelan military who had been recruited by the CIA to overthrow the government of Hugo Chavez. This is merely a cover story to legitimize a US coup to install that right-wing extremist who was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, says Brian. And that's Brian's opinion to us on 083 311 3311. Now, glad to be joined in the studio by our relationship expert, Susan O'Donoghue. Good morning to you, Susan.
Morning, Fran.
And it's good to see you today. You were talking to us about the cost of living and the impact it has, and I suppose the impact it has on us emotionally and where our mental health is concerned and all of that.
Yeah.
If you're under pressure financially, how difficult is that to deal with?
It can be extremely difficult, and it puts an extra layer. You're coming from your base layer there, then where it's about survival. And if we can't survive, sure, that's the first step, isn't it? Just to be able to have our basic needs met. So there's surveys show that a large majority of Irish people, 79%, the surveys are showing, report that the cost of living negatively affects their mental health, with 71% of employees citing that it's the main cause of stress and anxiety. So financial worries can be, you can be thinking about, oh my God, what's going to happen in the future, because some people really stress about what's going to happen in the future. Basic necessities like food, fuel, clothing, persistent worry, low mood and lack of sleep. If you're not sleeping, you need to be doing something around it. And I suppose this has affected all of us the last couple of years. You'd want to be really well off not to see the impact of some of this, So what it does is it reduces social and self-care activities like, say, meeting friends, going to the gym, taking care of your own self-care, like your appearance and stuff like that. And once that starts to dwindle, when you don't, have that little pep in your step around, I feel a bit healthier, I feel everything kind of goes downhill fairly fast, it can. So we really need to be watching ourselves on that. And the impact it's having on our young people is huge, isn't it? It's the difficulty with moving out from home, finding a house, it's the financial strain, it's feeling like, you're worse off than the previous years, than your than your parents or your grandparents. And when we look back on, say my grandparents, everybody was kind of communal. If you had the turkeys, I had the sheep, you had the spuds, I had, it was kind of the sense of that. But everybody was on the same level. But they didn't have the same stresses, as in no housing, the pressure to achieve, comparisons, we're back to that again, the comparison against, next door is doing this, next door has that, because they were all in the same boat. We're all pretty much, surviving, and that was it. So we didn't have that, but it's, it really puts huge pressure on people. The difficulty then of assessing healthcare, maybe, because maybe you can't afford to go to the dentist, you can't afford to get new glasses, you can't afford, it makes a huge impact on you, and all that chips away at you. So it's the increased demand then, like Jigsaw and Spun Out have seen a huge demand now for their services, and the limited access on professionals, if you want to go and talk to somebody, there is free ones, but not all of them are free, and then you have to consider the cost of that and how much that. So when you don't have money, it really impacts you. It really impacts your mental, your psychological and your physical health. And if your physical health starts to go, we know that we're not just one thing, that we're all
Of
your
course,
physical, your
yeah.
emotional, your social, everything. But it impacts your social life too. Because if I don't have money and, I can't go out and meet my friends for a coffee, or I can't go out and meet my friends for a sandwich, or whatever it is, right? For a pint, or whatever it is for a man, if they like to go out for their pints, or women like to go out for their pints, and you can't do that because you've no money. Like, it's huge, isn't it? Your social aspect is gone then.
And it does. I mean, when you hear that we're one of the best performing economies in the European Union, and that we're doing so well fiscally on a countrywide scale, on a nationwide scale, does that play into this? That you're struggling, but it seems like other people are doing extraordinarily well.
Yeah, of course it does. I think too that's the comparison thing, and that's a dangerous thing when we start to compare ourselves to others, because we are where we are, and it's how are we going to manage what we have. That's the most important thing, because like when I lived in America, they used to say, I don't care what so and so thinks, they're not paying my mortgage. That was the attitude, right? So it's not a bad thing, because we need to separate out from what the other person has and what they're doing, and like if they're going on 15 holidays a year, or they look like they're doing better off. We never know. We never know. They could be up to their eyeballs in debt. We don't know. We don't know what goes on for another. And we know that coming into Christmas is a really pressure time for people around money. It's huge. It like, I have never been a shopper. I don't like it. I just would prefer to hand people money for Christmas and be done with it. Yeah. It's not my thing. And then I feel like I'll get it wrong if I do buy something for them. I just think the pressure of it, and even the pressure of how much am I going to give somebody? What's the right amount? What's the done thing at the moment? It gets ridiculous. Give what you can. And if you can't give, that's okay too. It's okay to say, you know what, I'm not in a position this year.
Yeah, of course. We were speaking to our financial advisor in the last hour, Francis O'Hanlon, and Francis is making the point that people get into such debt over Christmas just to have this perfect postcard Christmas, and then it's all forgotten about, but you still have the debt to pay back.
So it wasn't that perfect.
Yeah.
And just because, I know that they say money can't buy you everything, but it certainly helps if you have it. You know what I mean? If you have other issues going on. But the thing about it is you could have all the money in the world. You could have the picture postcard, and all the Christmas movies are out now, right? And I must say, sometimes I indulge in one or two of them just for a letdown time when I'm ironing or something. But it really, makes us think that that's what's perfect. But is that what's perfect for me?
Yeah.
Or is that a false thing I'm doing to pretend I'm perfect? Does that make sense? Yeah, it's like, am I trying to imitate somebody else to make me feel like it's going to be perfect?
You end up doing that for the children, often, or for the partner, whatever, but largely for the children. You're trying to make this sort of...
But what are we trying to do then? We're trying to control the situation. And we're back to that unconscious behaviour again, where you're defensive, where you're trying to control what's happening outside of you so that you'll feel better. Because there is a sense of that in it. You're not doing it for no reason. You're doing it for a sense that you'll feel better. You feel like you've done something good. So
that's very clever, because I would have thought, but we're doing this, and we're doing this heroically for the children. But you are doing it
it's a sense
for
of
yourself,
I feel better now because
I've provided for them. And,
I've done my duty. Yeah, you feel like you have to reach the comparison thing again to what your parents maybe instilled in you around how you're the carer and you're the one who should be doing this. So it's always back to ourselves. We never do anything for no reason. There's always a reason.
And if you are struggling a bit financially, is it possible at all to compartmentalize a portion of your day which is left aside from those concerns?
100%.
Now, I know that's very hard to do, but is that a possibility?
It's practice, right? It's practice, and it's becoming more conscious of what's happening for you. It's being able to understand and recognise that, you know what, maybe I am doing this just to make myself feel better after Christmas, that I have provided, and I'll feel better when I think I'm up with the Joneses. But it's a very short-lived kind of satisfaction.
Yes.
The real satisfaction is in knowing that, I've sat with my kids, I've held them on the couch, we've watched the Christmas movies, the fire was going, we bought whatever, you know what I mean, had whatever potatoes or whatever it is your kids like, to cuddle into, or popcorn or whatever you do. That kind of sense of that, or that I went for a walk with the dog with the lads. It doesn't have to be, oh, it's picture perfect like it is, because that's not real. That's not picture perfect. We're back to the old social media and all that kind of stuff again, where people throw out these photos like everything's peachy in the garden, and meanwhile back at the ranch everything's in tatters. Yeah, and we're all trying to keep the boat afloat. I'm exhausted trying to do my part, and everybody else is exhausted trying to, I suppose, fit in to my part. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah.
No expectations. Yeah,
but you see, the other people with you have expectations of you. If you're the provider.
But this is because you've set that goal. You've set it up. Yeah. So how now am I going to say, what's my need in this? How am I going to take care of myself? And let your kids see you do that, because that's the best Christmas present you'll ever give them, because they'll learn how to do it for themselves.
Right. So would you tell them up front and say, look, this year finances are a little tight?
100%.
You would have that
Not
conversation.
a problem. Not a problem. If I thought that they were going, ma'am, and like, it's different if they're smallies, because generally you could get them a box and they're happy.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. But when they get to a certain age, they're looking for phones and they're looking for whatever, they're looking all the electronic stuff, and it's huge money. It's not like, I don't know how much a PlayStation is anymore, because I've gone past that period, but I'm sure they're €500 like for a play.
Must be all day long.
Crazy money. Yeah. So when my lads were the age of those kind of things, and whatever they were at the time, €300 or €400, I'd say to them, here's this amount of money. And there was two in the family that were mad into that kind of stuff. I'd give them whatever it was, €100 each for Christmas, and then I'd say to them, now, whatever else money you get, you can pool your money and you can buy it. That was the way I did it. Now, obviously, I'd buy him something small on the side as well, because I'd like him to have something to open for Christmas Day. But that's how I did it. Right. And that way it instilled in them too that, this stuff is expensive. And
you must budget for yourself.
Exactly. And it's like my youngest lad said to me there a while ago, he said, I don't know what I was talking about, and he was talking about getting a car or doing something like that. And I said, that'll take a lot of saving. Yeah, he said, but nothing you ever got for free, you appreciate it. And I thought, whoa, that's very mature, because I didn't think that he thought like that. And there's my presumption again. But that's what I'm saying. That's the kind of stuff we want to instill in them. That, if you work and you put your money together and you think it out, and you say, how am I going to manage this? And if I pool with somebody else, will I be able to? And then you have to have the respect for what you buy as well, that it's shared.
Yes.
Yeah, that's my way to do it now. But everybody, will find their own.
Yeah, but I mean, that's all very positive and a very mature way to deal with it. But most people don't. You see, I think what's wrong with the current generation, if I might be so bold as to make a big sweeping statement now, is that we try to give them what we didn't have.
100%.
And has that taken away from their resilience and maybe maybe even their ability to deal with money and budget?
100%. And you can't. There's no blame here anyway, or there's no shame. Look, we are where we are where we need to be. We can always change things. That's the beauty about the brain. The brain is very malleable, and it changes. Just because we've had a traumatic life, or that we've lived in terrible conditions, doesn't mean that we can't move on from that. It certainly makes it more difficult, but it doesn't mean we can't move on from that. And I think it's the same with our children. We do wrap them in cotton wool a lot, for a lot of us. I'm not saying everybody, but I know myself, even on my first had a different experience than my third did, than my second did. That's one thing I know for sure. But you do learn as you go along, and there's no wrong or there's no right. We're doing our best, and that's all you can do.
And within a relationship, let's take a couple, for example. I presume the financial matters and money difficulties can be catastrophic, I would imagine, to relationships.
Of course they can. They can break down a relationship. And I think the most important thing in a relationship is communication. If I cannot sit with you and talk to you about money, and I would ask people today to even think about how their relationship is with money, can they even think about it? Not to mind say discuss it with somebody else, because it's a huge block, isn't it? It's like money was a dirty thing to talk about.
Yeah.
For a lot of us. And it was I suppose, the fear of going out and taking care of yourself with money. And I suppose in my early time with my husband, now we would have had that where we wouldn't have talked about money because, it was kind of a taboo subject. But sure, if you don't talk about it, how are you going to know? And I know, like, when things got hard with the banks and all, the first thing people were advised to do was go to their bank and talk to them.
Yeah.
You know, and it's the same in couple relationships. We need to be able to have the hard conversations without using the you statement. We need to be able to talk about ourselves and come from an I place. This is how I feel. This is what's going on for me. I'd love to hear your side of it. That's the only time you use the you word. You know, it's not you're the one who's spending the money, you're the one who's sure you're in control, you can't take care of it. You know, you get this back and forth if you go into it. So
of course, yeah. And do you ever get, I know it's an old-fashioned notion at this point, Susan, but that notion that the man is the provider. Nowadays you need two people paying mortgages and all that sort of thing, but that notion of masculinity as well tied up with, I'm the provider, maybe now I can't provide in the way I should, and does that all get very complex?
It does, of course, because I mean, if you were brought up in that culture, or you've that headspace where the man goes out and provides, which I'm sure a lot of people feel that they're obliged to do that.
Yeah.
Even though a lot of women do it now, and you know they also take care of the house as the man does.
Absolutely, yeah.
But there's that certain thing in it, because that's where we're coming from, and I spoke about this before, whereas the woman does have the children, the woman does have the ability to provide, to nurture the child until they're whatever amount of months, or six months or a year old. So it is kind of ingrained in us to a certain extent, and it can be devastating to think that you can't take care of your family. It's absolutely heartbreaking, right? And that does huge things to the person who feels that way. And then what happens is they feel that way, and whether they think it or not, and really, I suppose it's so unintentional, they pass it on to their kids. Their kids know something's out of whack. The kids know, because there's always a knowing there, isn't there? As a child, you know there's something wrong. And kids generally tend to blame themselves then. If it's not explained to them, if the kids aren't set down, if you're having financial difficulties, if you're struggling, and who isn't at certain times? Like I remember lots of times in my life where I had to go, you know, that's it, I can't afford this, you know, there's not a hope of getting it. But I'm from the old school where you don't borrow if you don't have the money. You know, that's kind of the school I'm from, and that has served me well, in the sense of I haven't overdid a lot of things. But there's still been times where it's been really, really tight, and I've had to say to the lads, look, this is where it is now, you know, we'll have to do this and this.
And if you're not open with them and they blame themselves down the road, then of course that is
it's traumatic, isn't it? Then now this is where you come into say the unconsciousness. This is where I start to get my defensive behaviours. This is where I feel there's threats coming at me, because although there's nothing said in the house, maybe I know there's something wrong. Yeah, because that look, you know, maybe you'll ask, can I go here or can I go there? You might be 10 years of age and your friends are going off somewhere, and it's kind of that look. You know, you don't even have to say anything. They'd be better off if they set you down and said, look, this is the way it is at the moment. It won't always be like that, but it's just like this now.
But you're better off to have that conversation.
Because at least they know, because if they don't know, they'll make it up. And that's when you have the trauma and the stuff that we bring forward into adulthood, that every time then someone mentions money, we're allergic to hearing about it because it's a taboo subject. Yeah, so we don't want anything to be a taboo subject. We want to be able to talk about everything. So communication is always key.
Before we go on a slightly different topic, Angie McGrath spoke to us earlier on about grieving, and she kind of opened up a bit of a can of worms in some ways, and stating the truth, which is that largely it's the women, particularly if people are dying in your family, it's the women that are the carers. They're the 24/7 sort of appointed nurses at the time. The fellas come and go and sort of, you know, bring stuff and do whatever driving is involved, but certainly it's the women's that take on that role. Would you agree with that? Because we've had an enormous amount of people reacting to that statement.
I would say research probably shows, and I'm sure it does, that women are the carers most of the time, but men are carers too. And I would say, you know, there's a lot of men out there that are caring for people. But in general, I suppose it is the women who take on that role. And if I'm just presuming now that this comes from the whole thing around we're the nurturers.
But do we, and I mean men, do we leave them to, if you know what I mean, you know?
Okay, I'll say this, right? When my first child was born, right, she was rolled in cotton wool, right? I would say that, you know, the man didn't get a look in. right? Because no one could do it better than me. That was the kind of, even though I didn't consciously think that, but that's how it felt, that this was my job
You
to
were
do
the
this
mother.
perfectly.
Yes. Yeah.
And no mistakes. It makes me laugh now when I think about it, because sure, that's how we learn. But that was the rule. You just do this and do it right? And then I started reading books, and and that was a total rabbit hole altogether, because half the stuff in the book would just frighten you. You know what I mean? This can happen and that can happen. You better off not to go there. It's like going on Google.
Yeah.
But I just feel that women do take on those caring roles, because culturally that's what women did. I would say it's not as bad as it used to be, maybe. Like, I have seen a lot of men who step up and take care of people. You know, and I would say that my hubby now he would do as much housework as I do, and that's because he's allowed to.
Yes. Okay. Right.
How's that sit?
No, I mean that's not what I thought you were going to say to me, but I think it's great.
Yeah, I think that when I am open and honest, and it's about communication again, and when I am able to say it to myself first, I'm overwhelmed here. I can't do it all, and say, is there any chance you could give me a hand? Right? Because it's not the norm for them now. Remember, most of the time we just take over.
Yeah, of course.
So if we don't have, I suppose, the honesty and openness with ourselves to tell ourselves that we need help, and then to be able to have not that fear of asking, because it can be really threatening to ask for help, because you might be seen as, God, she's not able. Yeah.
Yes.
Everyone else is doing it, she's not. Do you know, this kind of sense of that? I would say raising children or taking care of somebody, anybody, is one of the hardest jobs you'll ever do in your life. It's exhausting.
If people want to talk to you, Susan, how can they do that?
No problem at all. It's 086 367 256 or info@emotionalwellbeing.ie. Thanks very much, Fran.
Always good to see you. Thanks very much indeed for that, Susan. Just some breaking news for you. The architect and television presenter Hugh Wallace, best known to TV audiences as a long-serving judge on Home of the Year, he's passed away at the age of 60, and I'm kind of sorry to hear that. He was a guest on the programme several times, and most intelligent, bright fellow, and a great conversationalist as well. So that's sad news. Just the age of 68 there, and that's Hugh Wallace, who has passed away. We'll take a break, back in just a moment.
Tip FM's Tip Today.
With Slattery's Garage Puckon. Now is the time to pick up your next van. From the award-winning Peugeot Partner van to the Expert and the load-lugging Boxer van. We have big vans, high-roof vans, long wheelbase vans. You'll find them all at Slattery's Garage Puckon. See slatterysgarage.ie.